Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, CoMotion, for having us. Hi, everyone. My name is Faye, and I lead business development strategic partnerships for BlueSpace. This is not working. Keep going? Okay, great. I lead business development strategic partnerships for BlueSpace. We provide explainable AI solutions for autonomy. So there are two main things that we solve for. First is safety, which I've heard a lot about already this morning. How can you ensure that your AV is safe enough to operate? How can you know that it will handle all of the VRUs that exist in the world today, not just pedestrians, but also emerging micromobility like scooters, bicyclists, other form factors. And beyond safety, the second is scalability. So you know it'll work, but how can you ensure that it will work safely everywhere? Not just here in LA, but also in Paris, in Milan, in parts of Asia. How can you make sure that your AV will work without having to spend billions of dollars in training data, infrastructure to deploy in just one small geofence location? So at BlueSpace, unlike the rest of the conventional autonomy industry, which focuses on deep learning and inference-based technology, we provide an explainable solution. And what we mean by explainability is that our software is traceable and predictable, which means that you can trace the software code line by line and predict failure rates. This also allows for our software to be certified and verified by third parties to regulation and automotive standards, helping to build trust and adoption among regulators, customers, and end users. How we enable explainability is that we provide an advanced math and physics-based optimization approach to autonomy. So what this means is that we focus on solving for motion instead of using training data to infer what that object it is. So we don't necessarily care up front, is it a bicyclist or a person or a car? We care more about how is it moving and will it be in the way of the autonomous vehicle. So the example here on the slide, if you have a tow truck pulling a car and it's driving down the freeway, moving in the same direction, to us that's one object. But if for some reason the chain breaks and the car starts rolling off the truck and going in the opposite direction, we detect that change in motion, and now to us it's two separate objects moving in two distinct motions. So with this focus on motion, we have two main components for mobility and autonomy. The first is positioning, knowing your own motion very well and accurately. And the second is situational awareness, knowing how everything around you is moving and where it is in relation to you. First, positioning. We're able to provide robust and accurate positioning independent of GPS. So how this solves for safety is that we remove the dependency on GPS and can operate in areas where GPS might be denied or degraded or spoofed. So for on-road autonomy, think tunnels, bridges, rural areas where GPS is not always available. This also works very well in off-road autonomy situations for mining, agriculture, other applications. In terms of scalability, we're able to do this with just our LiDAR sensor and a MEMS-grade IMU, lowering the cost for positioning in GPS-denied environments, being able to offer this at a fraction of the cost compared to solutions on the market today. We've tested this solution in all sorts of environments and shows that it can truly scale and provide similar performance across the board for both on-road and off-road driving that outperforms the solutions that we've seen and also existing research. So here's a quick example of some of the testing that we've done to date in off-road environments for the US Army, where we're driving across rugged terrain, lots of hills, bumpy, also a lot of kind of twists and turns, and we're able to measure our performance and positioning to very low error rates to know that our vehicle is exactly where it ends up in the loop that we're driving. So with this hardware, we can offer this GPS-denied positioning and also upgrade it to include situational awareness and full autonomy, providing a solution at a fraction of the cost of others. As I mentioned at the beginning, conventional autonomy has some critical pain points, and many of our team come from leading robotaxi companies, automotive, and research institutions. So these are things that we've experienced firsthand for ourselves. We found that the deep learning approach to autonomy can be unpredictable. You're not quite sure how it will react in any situation, and it's only as good as the training data that it takes in. On the topic of training data, this can be costly and unscalable. To deploy in any specific location, you have to drive around for millions of miles, spend millions, if not billions of dollars, collecting and annotating this training data. In a study according to McKinsey, it's estimated that for L4 autonomy, companies spend up to $2 billion in validation, which includes the data collection, training, simulation, and testing. BlueSpace helps to lower this cost and helps to enable scalability by removing this need for external dependencies. So our software works without any training data. We also don't rely on any HD mapping, meaning that we can deploy anywhere for the first time without these high upfront costs and without a high lead time to deployment. In terms of safety performance, our motion accuracy is also 10 to 100 times better than publicly available industry benchmarks. And the important benchmark to know is the yaw rate accuracy, which is the rotational accuracy, which we're 50 times better. This is important for those safety critical situations where someone might be cutting you off suddenly, maybe they're doing a U-turn in front of you, or you have a scooter coming out of nowhere. It's the rotational accuracy that you need to detect up front to be able to stop safely and avoid accidents or collisions. This is us testing our software in Northern California. We've not driven in this area before. We haven't collected any training data here. And what you're seeing is we're detecting all of the objects on the road around us in slightly darker blue, and then we're making motion predictions of those objects a couple seconds out in lighter blue. So this can scale up to hundreds of objects. It can be a car, a pedestrian, a bicyclist, any object that our vehicle encounters. We're able to detect it and predict its motion. And it's not only about if you can predict the motion, but also what do you do with it. So this is us testing for some of those time and safety critical scenarios in a safe environment with a soft car and also a child with a banana costume over its head. We specifically did the child dummy test because that's not something you would see in a day-to-day setting, not something you would be able to train your algorithms for. But our system picks up the motion of that dummy as it comes out from behind another vehicle, and we're able to safely come to a stop and not hit the poor child dummy. Our software is extremely flexible. We can work on any vehicle platform and any operating environment. So we can cover both off-road industrial use cases and defense use cases, as well as on-road ADAS and automotive use cases, leading to total addressable market size of over $150 billion by 2028. To date, we've had engagements in many of these markets already. We've focused on bus and truck yard automation projects, helping to deliver autonomy where it's most needed to address things like labor shortages, also to remove workers out of harm's way in safety critical scenarios. We have $2 million in contracting to date, and also working on automotive ADAS as well as defense use cases. We'd love to partner with transit operators, transit agencies, DOTs on being able to provide safe and scalable autonomy and work with you to pursue grants in those areas. For investors, we've raised $12.5 million to date. We're actively raising our next round of $25 million with $5 million already committed. Looking forward to meeting with you all, and we'll open the floor to any questions.
Thank you so much. Great work. So we have a couple of minutes for questions from the panel of experts. Who wants to go first?
Thank you for the presentation, Faye. I'm John from MIT. My question is, are you trying to basically recreate the full stack for AV, or is there some very specific component that you feel you have a technological advantage on? number one. Number two, really, I mean, who is your customer base? Is it ultimately OEMs? Is it the existing AV industry? Who are you trying to sell into?
Yeah, great questions. So to answer your first question of whether we have a special component of the AV layer or if we have the entire AV stack, it's both. So our core IP is in the perception and prediction layer of the AV stack, and that's where our motion-first approach lies. We do have our own stack for testing and development purposes, and we are able to operate an AV ourselves. That being said, there are many, many AV players in the industry, and our goal is to move the entire industry forward. So we've also partnered with other AV companies who see us as a redundant safety system. I think especially for L4, L5, everyone has seen that safety redundancy is critical, not just in the hardware, but also in the software. And so we can also act as that independent safety layer to provide that extra layer of safety for these safety and time critical situations. In terms of our end customer, we're designed to be modular and flexible, so we do partner with OEMs that are looking to develop ADAS and autonomy capabilities themselves, but we also do work directly with fleet operators who are looking to implement autonomy at all levels sooner rather than later, as OEMs with the production timelines can take 3 to 5 years.
Hi, Faye. I'm Jance. Thanks so much for the pitch. Talked a lot about safety, so I'm going to ask maybe another question related to that.
Yeah.
How does the safety of your technology compare to a car that's being driven by a human being?
Yeah. So with our motion-first approach, we are able to provide a time advantage for detection. So, for example, in the safety critical scenarios where a car might be cutting you off or doing a U-turn in front of you or something kind of runs out in front of your vehicle, we're able to detect the motion before even you're able to see that the wheels of the other vehicle are turning or before you're able to see that someone is running out in front of you. So even for humans, there is a reaction time there, and I think that differs by person. But with our software, because we're able to pick up on those subtle changes in motion, we do provide a reaction time advantage when those milliseconds do matter.
Thank you so much, Faye. Great job. Thank you. Okay, next one. All the way from the UK, we have ANGOKA. ANGOKA provides the digital infrastructure for smart mobility, drones, autonomous buses, driverless trucks, and satellites. Welcome to the stage, Steve Berry.
I may need some help. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi, I'm Steve Berry. I'm the executive chairman of ANGOKA. As it was said, we're based in Belfast in London, England, so we're probably the first company ever to come from Northern Ireland to present in Los Angeles. So we're about devices. We're about embedding trust into embedded devices, and we operate in the digital smart mobility infrastructure. So we're intending to become the gold standard for IoT security. So our mission, just to read this off, ensure the safety and resiliency of smart cities and smart mobility by providing superior cybersecurity solutions to protect the communication of connected devices. We're fortunate to be supported by the National Cybersecurity Center, which is part of GCHQ. Unusually, they've actually given us money. We've been quoted by the Prime Minister. Unfortunately, it was Boris Johnson, but so we're relatively well known in the UK. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that we're scheduled to have a huge number of connected devices. There's a figure of 1 trillion by 2035, which means the attack surfaces will multiply dramatically. Quantum computers will invalidate almost all encryption standards, and end-to-end point security cannot be guaranteed. So our solution represents a paradigm shift. So basically, we are focused on the devices, We're not focused on the network. And we call this device private network, DBN. What we do is we integrate identity access control and key management onto our platform, which is embedded into IoT devices. And this is an alternative to what you may be familiar with, public key infrastructure, which is a standard right now. We're an alternative, or we can be a complementary asset to PKI. So this creates groups of trusted devices. As you can see from the diagram, we can break down a city into modular areas. It's extremely flexible, very agile. You can add and subtract devices in that area. It creates tamper-proof hardware-based device identities. Again, I mentioned access control. It's automated, it's decentralized. We're not dependent upon the network in a city or a mobility environment. We're also not reliant upon third-party certificates. So as more and more IoT security gets deployed under the existing systems, there's going to be a real issue around certificate management and the pure cost of that, and also the fact that outsiders have access to your system. Superior level of security, and as I mentioned, quantum secure. So highly resilient to cybersecurity attacks. Nothing is foolproof. Even the Pentagon gets hacked after spending billions, but we're as good as it gets. Again, I mentioned the quantum. We're retrofittable, so we've proven our technology over every connection, whether it's 3G, 4G, 5G, Bluetooth. We're just introducing satellite communications right now, and we're very flexible and cost-saving. So we're actually universal, but we're applying our technologies to smart city type of environments. Unusually, we're multimodal. We're in air mobility, we're in buses, trucks, and we're just entering the satellite industry. We are in the defense industry as well, and I'm going to give you an example of supply chain in a minute, but obviously a very large market. So one thing that's helping us is regulations. Safety and security, which was mentioned previously, is often an afterthought by entrepreneurs. They're more concerned about the actual autonomous truck, the autonomous software. But none of these projects are going to go live without the consideration of security, safety, trust. Fortunate to us, regulations are coming right now, and they would just start increasing. So people were going to be forced to actually implement security into these devices. So let me just give you a couple of examples. We actually have 12 concurrent projects, commercial projects in the UK right now. This one we're very proud of. It's taking place in Belfast City. We're implementing 4 driverless, no driver at all, autonomous buses to go through from a railway station and connecting to offices and homes, and actually goes by our headquarters as well. So this is going live the middle of next year. We're working with Belfast Harbour, British Telecom, and one of the many autonomous software companies called AXA. This was mentioned this morning, a very prestigious project for supply chain logistics. Nissan has got one of the biggest automotive factories in the world in Sunderland. They, believe it or not, they have 1,500 truck movements a day from the distribution centers just in time to the factory. We're now in the process of automating that. So what our technology would do, we would secure the communication to and from the trucks, to the remote control teleoperations center, roadside units, traffic systems, distribution centers, and just in time, if you will. And again, that's going live, I believe, in early February 25. So moving to air mobility, UK is quite advanced in urban air mobility. We're actually implementing a commercial system, 260 kilometers of drone highway. It's the second phase of a project. So our role in that would be the cybersecurity, the communication security, connecting the drone to drone, drone to ground station to drone. So this is going down the backbone of the UK. We actually have another project like this, which is in the Channel Islands, very similar. Lastly, but just another illustration, we're also involved in virtual ports, again, looking to secure the communication between the virtual port and the drone back to the virtual port. We also provide the identity management in terms of the landing and taking off of drones. We have a project that's just starting for offshore maritime, having a virtual port 40 kilometers off the coast of Scotland and using a virtual port for landing and taking off of drones for maintenance purposes for wind turbines. So very prestigious for us. We're sort of a golden oldie bit. Probably average age is 50, a lot of experience. I've done around 20 startup scale-ups in the last 35 years, 2 flotations. But of note is we've got 2 very prominent non-exec directors, which illustrates the importance of our technology. One is the former general manager of NATO, Koen Keispers. He ran NATO on a day-to-day basis. He also ran cybersecurity. He knows that as military operations become more digital, they need to be much better secured going forward. Then we have Nick Rose, who's the former global chief financial officer at Diageo. Not particularly relevant to what we're doing. What's relevant is that he was a senior director for both British Telecom and for BAE, and again understands the issues that we're trying to deal with. So that's a thank you, but just very quickly, as I said, safety and resiliency, and the previous speaker also talked about safety and resiliency. It is going to be the most important part of rolling out smart mobility, because without the trust and the compliance, you can just imagine a Hollywood movie of, hackers taking over an autonomous bus and driving it down and causing mayhem, if you will, if not worse. So this is going to become more and more critical in the next couple of years as we see these projects roll out. So thanks very much.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes for questions from the panel of experts.
Hey, Steve. Tiya from itselectric. Thank you for the presentation. Quick question regarding the differentiation of this being on device and not on network. So is this a layer in the stack, or is this actual hardware that goes on every piece of asset?
Yeah, so good question, obviously, and one that could take hours to explain all the technology behind it. So as I said, we're on the device, we're not on the network. The issue about being on the network is that the vast majority of hacks occur on the network and the applications on the network. So with a white piece of paper 5 years ago, we looked at how do you actually secure the systems as well as the best as you can. So we focused on the device. We have 12 different form factors in terms of deploying our technology. Ultimately, down the road, it could be that we design and actually deploy a microchip. So right now we embed our software onto other microchips right now. We also have a retrofittable dongle-like device that can go inside the cavity, and there's an API function as well.
It's a microchip or a dongle on every asset?
Yes, so we can put a dongle on, and being able to retrofit is actually quite beneficial. So we're engaging very much in traffic systems. So autonomous buses have to interface with traffic systems. Traffic systems are analog, but as they go digital, then they're connected between the bus and ambulances and so on and so forth. They're also connected to the central control rooms in cities, so they become another vulnerability point. So in theory, you could hack into an ambulance to get into the traffic system, which gets into the control center. So all that has got to be made secure. So the fact that we can retrofit existing systems actually is a huge economic benefit.
Good stuff, Steve. Real quick question is, you mentioned that some things your system's not unbreakable, right?
No, of course, nothing's unbreakable.
So how do you make sure, like, when you do have a problem, how do you track that to know that you've got an issue with since it's hardware based?
Well, that's obviously a very good question. We haven't had to factor that in to date. So all the projects that we're involved with are consortium based, and we've been invited in to provide the secure communications. And by definition, the projects get launched on the basis of working models. But we haven't actually had a situation yet where we have actually been hacked, either externally or through pen testing that we would be internally. But obviously, nothing's unbreakable. It just has not happened yet. So we just know that we are incredibly resilient in terms of our technology. No one's asked about the actual technology, but that's okay, I guess. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, next one we have Faction. Faction develops driverless electric vehicles with the speed and performance of cars at a fraction of the cost. Welcome to the stage. I am McKendrick.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. There we go. Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ian McKendrick. I am the founder and CEO at Faction, where we're working to build driverless vehicle fleets that we can deploy at scale. We don't actually manufacture the vehicles, but we work with OEMs, and then we also work with our business partners for deploying these fleets. Urban transportation is horribly broken. We've heard a lot about that even at the conference this week, and part of it is the reliance on the automobile as one size fits all for everything. It's leading to congestion, traffic, and really reducing the quality of life for all of us in the city centers. I had a little fun with an AI image generator, and I said, give me an example of dirty energy versus clean energy. And an AI image generator went straight to oil versus electricity, and even in wind in this case. But we're not doing very well if you use electric vehicle infrastructure or electric charging infrastructure as a proxy for how we're rolling out. China is actually doing much better than the rest of the world combined right now in terms of their electrification, but this alone is not the solution in terms of how do we solve our urban transportation problems. If you look at things like last mile logistics, 64% of the cost is actually in driver wages as well as fuel. Two areas you can directly attack by using driverless technologies as well as electrification of the vehicle fleets. And so coming back to an AI image generator for fun again, I said, give me an example of a robot delivering a sandwich, and give me an example of a car delivering a sandwich. And even something as simple as an AI image generator immediately keyed on relative payload size, where if you're going to be using a car for delivering a sandwich, it better be a pretty big sandwich. I also like to make the joke that bringing any of us a pizza in a 4,000-pound electric vehicle with 300 miles of battery range is also a little bit of overkill. If you look at what's been going on for last mile, we are trying to use gig workers and some of these services that did over 1.8 billion deliveries in 2022, but the majority of them are being done in internal combustion vehicles. Typically, they're older vehicles as well. And if you can get these services to transition to using alternative vehicle formats, you can have up to a 90% reduction in the carbon footprint of these types of services. So at Faction, what we started with was working with OEMs that do light electric vehicle systems, and we put on a pragmatic autonomous system. Its job is to basically stay in the lane and not hit things. We probably spent about as much work on our safety architecture as we do on the autonomy. We then combine it with our system we call teleassist, which is essentially a teleoperations system. And this is supervised autonomy. It's the humans and the computers working together. So almost think of a teleoperator as an air traffic controller for ground-based vehicles. This is in stark contrast to level 5 autonomy companies, which are typically hauling around a data center in the back of a trunk of a car. And this solution is not only horribly expensive, but it's also not very scalable and will continue to be a research project for many years. But more importantly, it's the cost of these systems. Faction's approach uses about 90% less cost in terms of the hardware on board the vehicles. But more importantly, it's about 95% less cost on the power. And for some reason, my slides got a little off here, but 95% of the power, 90% less on the hardware. And if I were to compare this to a traditional 100% AI-driven system, if I were to place that type of technology on a light electric vehicle, it would kill the battery in less than an hour and a half on that vehicle without even driving a single mile. And so this is where you really need to have a more pragmatic approach. It's something that can actually be brought to market. In practice, these vehicles essentially operate like a virtual train system. So this vehicle here is operating in South San Francisco. It is about to come along and encounter a vehicle that is double parked. And so at this point in time, the vehicle is alerting operations for assistance, at which point a human operator can connect to the vehicle, assess the situation, provide a path to get around that obstacle, and get the vehicle back on mission. These interactions are very brief, and two things come out of it. We enable to unblock that vehicle and continue on its mission, but at the same time, this is now training data that we can then look at and see how do we improve the efficiency of the system. Using this approach, you essentially have a operations center where you can have a few operators commanding multiple vehicles in the fleet. And the important part you might have noticed there is they're pressing buttons to control these vehicles. Don't think steering wheels and pedals. That's great for teleoperation demos in a parking lot, but it doesn't scale. Our approach very much is like that air traffic controller analogy. And the other important part here is that all in, we have to be able to do this for about $2 a mile. So these vehicles only cost about $35,000 each, and we're benchmarking ourselves against what the other alternatives might be. So you can't go build a $400,000 system here and expect it to be profitable. We began with micrologistics. Our first customer was actually a commercial bakery up in the Bay Area in Northern California. They had tried using gig worker services for their curbside delivery and B2B delivery use cases, but what they found is the gig workers were unreliable. Sometimes they would show, sometimes they wouldn't. They also told us occasionally they would ship 50 cupcakes to a coffee shop in the morning, and once in a while, one of those cupcakes is missing. Robots won't tend to have that problem. We're also extremely passionate about vehicle on demand. This is not a robotaxi, but this is where you can request a vehicle and have it come to you, and then you get to drive it yourself. This is an area where, especially if you can get away from using the automobile for this, it reduces congestion in the cities and is right-sizing the vehicles for the use case. The average urban trip, it's 1 to 2 people, 3 to 5 miles. And so if you can get people into alternative formats for the vehicles, once again, we can now start to do mixed mode fleets. If you look at the right side here, all the magenta routes you see are the ones we run currently right now in Northern California. We don't map an entire urban area. We map where our customers pay us to go. So when we collect data on an area, it's where we need to do those deliveries. So using that example I mentioned with the bakery, a lot of that was built using some of the missions we were doing for them. The operations center, of course, can then assist any of the vehicles in that area or even in other areas. And it's really about 1 operator to every 5 vehicles in the urban areas. It's about more like 1 to 10 vehicles when you think about highway segments where it's a little more structured driving. You will see us start to operate in Las Vegas soon. We did some demonstrations earlier this year. One of our partners over there is Go-Kart Tours, where you could actually rent a vehicle and take a tour where you're doing the driving. But instead of having to come to the arts district to retrieve the vehicle, now we bring the vehicle to where the customers are. And so once again, I like to pick unfair fights. So instead of mapping all of Las Vegas, we map the Strip, and now every hotel essentially becomes a virtual rental center for Go-Kart, which makes it a game changer for their business. The technology approach can be applied to any vehicle type, but we are very passionate about how we enable our partners with light electric vehicle systems. It's one of these win-win-win scenarios where not only can you provide a technology solution that is working well for the customer, but you're saving money in the process. And if we do our jobs right, we're also making a big impact on the quality of life for all of us in the city environments when you start thinking about mixed mode fleets. And how do you really fit the vehicle to the mission instead of trying to be one size fits all with everything. If you'd like to learn more, please visit our website or find me here at the conference this week. I'm happy to share more about what we're up to at Faction. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much. Now we have 3 minutes for questions from the panel of experts.
Do you guys hear me?
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the great presentation. Pamir from Blackbird here. I know a few companies have gone after this teleoperation aspect of introducing autonomy, right? For example, Vey, I know them quite well. I wonder if there's a technical challenge when you're operating in dense urban canyons where perhaps communication might be a problem when you need to assist these vehicles in trouble. I just want to learn more about that from you.
Yeah, there's actually 2 parts to the urban canyon kind of scenario. Both it's the communications as well as the localization, especially with GPS and such. And so with the communications aspect, we only drive in areas we're pre-qualified. So if you think of how our vehicles operate, it's almost like a virtual train system, but you can move the tracks on occasion. So we always pre-qualify the routes to know that we're successful on that route. for both for communications, but then we also use technologies that allow us to be operating in GPS-denied environments because it's just tunnels, parking structures, those things kind of happen. Our interactions, though, are designed to only work over LTE. We don't necessarily need high bandwidth. Our operators get context on the scenario that they're facing, and then they're pressing buttons to authorize it. So it's not that they're not trying to remote control or steer these vehicles, which reduces the cost of the bandwidth that we need, the latency, and also means we can operate in basically over LTE networks, which are much better served than solutions that might require like wraparound monitors. And then you don't have to ask me about whether that's going to work or not. Talk to Verizon or AT&T. You'll flood the networks if you have to do the higher bandwidth stuff. So ours are basically pre-qualified and light touch is the way I think of it.
Quick follow-up on that. So since you need to pre-qualify in a given region or location in the city, how do you then scale it up to, let's say, 30, 40, 50 cities around the world?
Yeah, excellent question. So our approach is that when we qualify a route, we don't actually use LiDAR or high-definition maps. All our systems are based on visual systems, as well as both visual and thermal, and then also radar. And then we'll also use GPS for kind of figuring out where center lines are, and the vehicles will center themselves up within the lanes. So we use course maps, which are very easy to generate, so we can do it relatively quickly. So that video you saw of Las Vegas operating, we were able to hit Las Vegas on a Monday, capture some of the key routes within the next 24 hours and actually be running operations on the third day on selected routes. This is also very different than the level 5 crowd that's trying to do high-def maps of entire city centers. Ours is a much lighter weight approach to do it. So.
Tiya from itselectric. How have the most recent regulatory hurdles impacted your business?
Yeah, excellent question. For us, we're a little bit different because as we're a supervised autonomous system, we're very different from someone who's trying to do level 5. Think of us more like a level 2, 3 plus supervision type of system. There isn't really a category definitions for how we do these things, but the real difference is that when we talk to regulators, we explain what the responsibility of the vehicle is versus what the humans are doing. And because the vehicles are only allowed to make very deterministic decisions, they treat us more like a level 2, 3 system, and then the humans provide the judgment calls. So in most cases, this has actually already been approved in many states through legislation. Prior to starting Faction, I was VP of engineering at a company called Starsky Robotics, where we were doing long-haul semi-trucks. And we co-sponsored legislation, even with companies like Waymo. For most of the southern states in the United States, our mode of operation is actually already approved by law in terms of how you operate. And even in California, when we work with California DMV and CHP, they've been on site for demonstrations, so we show them how we operate. But we always try to, lead with talking to the regulators in advance to make sure they understand how we operate and how it's different from people aspiring to do level 5.
One more follow-up. You use the air traffic control analogy, and in air traffic control, it's a human controller overseeing a human pilot. So how is your view of this in regards to social impact? And obviously the biggest argument around AV and AV delivery in terms of it removing sort of low-wage or entry-level jobs from a community.
Yeah. So yeah, and this is something that's actually important for us at Faction as well, because getting a job to be a driver, and even if you're working as a gig worker, isn't a very good job. You're getting squeezed on your pay, and they're treating you like a commodity. But in our scenario, I can make that same person much more productive to come work for us in a teleoperations center. So I can pay them more money, I can give them a better quality of life with that job. And we even found this in the long-haul trucking case a few years ago. If you go talk to the Teamsters and you say, okay, how do I get your membership out of having to be in a truck 30 days out of the month, now they can go sleep in their bed every night, and I can pay them more money because they're a more productive employee. That's something we're passionate about doing. And so our job is to actually be a friend of both the unions as well as the kind of people that would have typically taken a driving job, but come work with us and we'll actually give you a better job and a better pay rate too. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.